In any emergency, you know the clock is ticking. But what happens when the crisis is invisible? Something happening inside trillions of cells all at once? Or what if it's the total opposite? A disaster so huge you can't even count the victims. Well, today, we're going to break down two extremes of emergency medicine: the tiny internal breakdown of medical shock and the cold, hard math of mass casualty triage.
All right, so here's our game plan. We're going to start small, I mean really small, at the cellular level to get what shock actually is and the 4 ways it can attack the body. Then, once we've got the warning signs down for a single person, we'll zoom way out and see how first responders deal with the absolute chaos of a mass casualty incident, from sorting victims to taking those first life-saving actions. So, let's start with the word shock. We throw it around all the time, right? For surprise, for fear. But in medicine, it means something way more specific and way more dangerous. It's this silent crisis that starts long before a patient ever collapses. And it all begins right here, inside a single cell. Okay, first thing, forget everything you think you know about shock from the movies. It's not about just fainting or having low blood pressure. At its very core, shock is a delivery problem. Your cells are literally starving for oxygen because blood isn't getting to them. And a cell without oxygen, well, it's a cell that's dying. It's really that simple, and that serious. Here's a great way to think about it. Imagine your body is a massive city, and oxygen is the electricity. When you're in shock, the power grid fails. The lights go out. To survive, your cells frantically switch over to this backup generator. It's called anaerobic metabolism. But here's the catch. This backup is super inefficient, it's dirty, and it starts pumping out a toxic exhaust into your whole system. That exhaust? It's lactic acid. So how can doctors actually see that toxic smoke filling up the city? They measure it. A lactic acid level above 2, that's the fire alarm going off. It's the proof that the body's power grid is failing and cells are in deep, deep trouble. And the higher that number goes, the bigger the fire. Now, this cellular power failure doesn't just happen for one reason. Nope. There are actually 4 very different ways the whole grid can go down, and each one is its own unique kind of crisis. You can actually think of your entire circulatory system like basic plumbing. With cardiogenic shock, the pump is broken. The heart itself is failing. For hypovolemic shock, there's just not enough fluid in the pipes, usually because of bleeding. Distributive shock, that's a pipe problem. The vessels get all leaky and can't hold pressure. And finally, you've got obstructive shock, which is just a clog in the system, something physically blocking the blood from flowing. Let's just pause on that pipe problem for a second. Why? Because it is the single most common cause of shock you'll see inside a hospital: sepsis. This is what happens when a runaway infection makes your body freak out, causing a massive inflammatory response that makes your blood vessels super leaky. The result is a catastrophic, system-wide drop in blood pressure. But here's the thing. When that power grid starts to fail, your body does not go down without a fight. It launches this desperate counterattack, and it sends out very clear SOS signals that, if you know what you're looking for, can warn you that a major crisis is brewing. So the body's first move is to slam the panic button. That's the fight or flight response. It just floods your system with adrenaline, trying to squeeze the blood vessels shut to force whatever blood is left to the most important places: your brain, your heart, and your kidneys. It's a temporary fix, for sure, but it's a heroic last stand. And you can actually see this battle happening on a blood pressure monitor. Normally, you've got a nice healthy gap between the top number and the bottom number, let's say 120/60. But as the body starts fighting to compensate for shock, it squeezes those arteries, and that bottom number starts to creep up, maybe to 120/80. See how that gap is shrinking? That's called a narrowing pulse pressure, and it is a huge red flag that the body is straining to its absolute limit. But that desperate fight, it can't last forever. Eventually, the body's defenses just break. This is what we call uncompensated shock, and it's the tipping point. The blood pressure absolutely plummets. The kidneys start to shut down. The person gets confused or unresponsive. This is the moment a patient is truly circling the drain, and without immediate intensive care, that battle will be lost. So everything we've talked about so far has been about saving one single person. Now, let's zoom all the way out. What happens when it's not one patient, but 20 or 100? The entire rulebook gets thrown out the window. Think about it: a train derailment, a building collapse, some kind of natural disaster. Suddenly you have dozens, maybe hundreds of victims. You have limited resources, and the clock is ticking for everyone. This is the central question of any mass casualty incident, and the answer is a system called triage. In a mass casualty, the whole goal of medicine has to flip on its head. It's no longer about doing everything you possibly can for the patient right in front of you. It's about doing the greatest good for the greatest number of people. And to do that, responders use triage. And listen, this is not treatment. It's a rapid, brutal sorting process to figure out who has the best chance of survival if they get help right now.
And the rules, they are incredibly tough. Responders don't start CPR. They don't start IVs. They don't give out meds. They just assess. And the hardest rule of all is that last one. If they open a victim's airway and the person still isn't breathing, they are tagged as expectant and the rescuer has to move on. It's a brutal calculation, but it's done to save others who have a better chance.
This whole sorting process boils down to just 4 colors. Red tags go to the immediate victims. These are the people who will die in minutes without help. Yellow is for the delayed. They're seriously hurt, but they're stable enough to wait a little bit. Green is for the walking wounded, minor stuff. And finally, black is for the expectant, those whose injuries are so severe they're considered unlikely to survive, even with care. Okay, so once the entire scene is sorted by color, then the real work can finally begin. Responders can now turn their full attention to those red-tagged victims, and they follow a very strict life-saving checklist called the ABCDEs.
Yep. After that first chaotic triage sweep, the focus immediately shifts to the red tag victims. This is where treatment finally starts, and it's done using a systematic, prioritized approach called the primary survey. Its whole purpose is to find and fix the things that will kill a person in order of importance.
And the system is a really simple acronym, A, B, C, D, E. You fix any problems in that exact order, no skipping ahead. A is for airway. Is it open? B is for breathing. Are they actually moving air? C is for circulation. Stop any life-threatening bleeding. D is for disability, a quick check of their brain function. And E is for exposure, getting the clothes off to find any injuries you might have missed. This sequence makes sure the most critical problems get handled first, every single time.
Let's just look a little closer at that first critical step, airway. If it's blocked, a rescuer might have to create a new one. Out in the field, on an adult, that means doing a cricothyrotomy. It's a fast emergency procedure. But in a hospital or on a child, it needs a much more complex surgical tracheostomy. Getting this one decision right can absolutely be the difference between life and death. So let's bring it all home. The number one thing to remember about shock is that it's a crisis of oxygen delivery to the cells, and that narrowing pulse pressure is your huge early warning sign. For mass casualties, you gotta remember the mission changes. Triage is all about sorting, not treating to save the most people. And when you finally do start treating, you always start with the ABCDEs. If you can master those principles, you can bring some order to even the most chaotic situations.
So, whether you're looking at a single cell that's starving for oxygen or an entire field of victims, the underlying principle is exactly the same. You have to impose order on chaos. And sometimes the hardest choices, like who gets a black tag or who gets help first, those are the ones that ultimately save the most lives. The one unbreakable rule in any crisis: have a plan. Thanks for joining us.